Hello everyone and welcome to the GoSkills webinar on Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt. I'm Ray Sheen. I'll be leading this webinar for us today. We also have Shannon on the line with us. Shannon will be taking your questions, and at the end of the session she'll share those questions with me and I'll answer them as best we can. With that, let's go ahead and get started. The Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt is well, let's just talk about Lean Six Sigma for a moment. Lean Six Sigma is a process improvement methodology that's designed to eliminate problems, remove waste and inefficiency, and improve working conditions to provide a better response to customer needs. And I'm sure you all just read that also, and you said, why did you bother reading it? Well, I want to emphasize a few of those points, and we'll go through them more in detail, is that we are looking to improve processes. It is a process improvement, a problem-solving methodology. Its goal is to make those problems go away, thereby removing waste, making us more efficient, and an outgrowth of that is that we often have improved working conditions. Well, that's not the primary focus. It is one of the things that often happens. If there's fewer problems, life is nicer for us wherever we're working. And this approach does combine tools, methods, and principles of both the Lean methodology and the Six Sigma methodology into one powerful methodology that's you can use for improving your processes, operations. And then finally, Lean Six Sigma is a team-oriented approach. It's one that typically leverages a team of anywhere from 3 to 6 people using the skills, the experience, the subject matter expertise that all of them bring. And that's a way of maximizing the efficiency for the team, for the process, and getting dramatically better results than one person doing it on their own. Okay, so let's go through this a little bit today and see what we want to talk about. And what I'd like to address today are 8 truths that you should know before participating on a problem-solving project. If you're going to be a team member on a project, you probably you should be aware of each of these and understand how to apply them appropriately. Let me quickly run through them and then we'll go through each in more detail. First one is, what are the critical elements for success on a problem-solving project? What are the things we need to make sure we do well? Another one is there a right way and a wrong way to solve problems? We want to know the right way so we can avoid doing things the wrong way. Third is, what good is having a program for problem solving? Why don't we just solve problems? Why do we have to have meetings and set up charters and all this kind of stuff? Why don't we just do it? And we'll talk about that along the way. Fourth question, my organization doesn't use Lean Six Sigma. So why should I bother looking at this? Why do I even care about this yellow belt stuff? There's some very good reasons for that, and we'll explain that too when we get to that point in the presentation. Our fifth question is, what's this belt thing? We're talking yellow belt. Are there other belts? What are these belts? They're confusing. I don't understand them. I'll try to explain that a little bit. It's really just understanding roles and responsibilities of various people on a problem-solving project. Now, your sixth question here is, I'm a subject matter expert on a problem-solving project. What do I need to know to actually work well with this team? Many of the answers to that we will have already covered, but I'll catch a couple other points at this point in our presentation. Seventh question is, well, what if I'm not very good at math? Do I still need to use this Lean Six Sigma? Isn't it a statistically based approach? And do I have to use those statistics to solve problems? We'll address that one. And then finally, certification. One of the things in the GoSkills program is we do prepare you to take an exam for certification. Should you be certified? What good is it? Why should I even do that? So with those being the questions that we'll be looking at, let's get started. And I'll start off with the very first question, which was, what are the critical elements for success on a problem-solving project? Now, people have been solving problems for a long time. In fact, you could say they've been doing it since the dawn of mankind, that people have always had to solve problems. So what are the things that we've learned about what makes for successful problem solving? Well, the critical elements we have is that first, you need to work on the right problem. What is the real problem? You need to get to the true a problem that's really impacting customers or the business, one that has significance. And then we want to solve the real problem, the root cause. We don't want to just deal with symptoms. We want to get to the underlying root cause and actually make that problem go away and not just have it come back again and again because we hadn't solved the underlying cause. The third is that we want to create a true resolution. We don't want to just study the problem. We don't want to just talk about it. We just don't want to have a hypothetical solution. We want one that really works. And then last, we want to make sure that that solution is actually implemented. It resets our process, our business, our systems so that the problem doesn't come back again a week later or 2 weeks later because we went back to doing things the same old way. Now, those are the principles that we've found for successful problem-solving approaches. They deal with all those. And in fact, they're summed up in this wheel that you see here on this slide, the Plan, Do, Check, Act wheel. This is referred to sometimes as the Shewhart cycle or Deming wheel because Walter Shewhart is the person who first came up with it, and one of his students, Edward Deming, is the one who made it very popular. But it just says that we start off by planning, what are we going to look at? What's important to the business? Actually doing the analysis to find the real problem. Checking, making sure that our solution really works. And then act, putting that solution in place so that it actually sticks and stays. Now, again, this all sounds very simple in theory, should be easy to do, but the reality is it's actually fairly hard in practice. There's lots of places where we can have some pitfalls. And just to take a look at a little bit deeper of the study of this is when I've been involved with problem-solving methodologies, process improvement methodologies for over 30 years. Been involved with a number of different ones, and I pulled out the key attributes that we see across all of those problem-solving methodologies. One is that they have a process. It's not just random events, but they use an approach, a structured approach, a standard process to work through the problem-solving system and get to the root cause, find a solution, and implement it well. Actions are performed then in that proper sequence. That's part of it being a process, is a set sequence. And a key for success is that people trust the process. They follow the process. Even if it looks like the process isn't leading to a clear answer, we keep following the process because we have confidence it will get us to a good result. Another attribute we find is that it engages people. It's not a single person. It's usually a team approach because most of the time our problems are going to be cross-functional in nature. A problem starts in one location, but it's manifesting itself in some other aspect of the business. And so we have to fix the problem where it really starts, and we need to understand how it's even how the fix is going to impact the other parts of the business. So again, most of these methodologies use a cross-functional team. The team plans and implements the entire solution. A third attribute is it involves a customer focus, a customer aspect. We rely on customer input to determine what the problem is that we should be discussing. That doesn't tell us what the root cause is, but it tells us how it's manifesting itself. So I don't make things better for myself and worse for the customer. I look at the approach from the problem from the customer's perspective. Is it causing delays in delivering the products or services to them? Is it creating errors in the billing to them? What's creating the problem from the customer perspective? And it could be an internal or an external customer, just depending upon the nature of the process and how it's working. Once again, the success is based upon understanding that customer impact and working to resolve that, making that aspect better. And then the final attribute is that the approach relies on data. It's not just an approach that we guess, we do what we think is right, or even a problem I've run into recently is we do what's politically correct even if it's not what the data tells us. Well, we need to look at what the data is telling us. If we're going to solve the problem and make the problem go away, we need to understand what the problem is, and we use data to help us with that. So we do that true data analysis. Data is collected, data is analyzed, and based on that, we also let data demonstrate that the problem is solved. We look at what was the manifestation of the problem before our solution was put in place, and now we look at the data after the solution has been put in place to make sure it really did stick. Okay, well, let's go on to our next question, which was, is there a right way or a wrong way to do problem solving? Well, on one hand, I would say that There isn't a wrong way if you're using a way that's been demonstrated to work. There are many different methodologies out there. And if your organization has one that works, well, then by all means use it. If your organization, for instance, loves to use the 8D process, the 8 discipline process, or maybe you've chosen to use the methodology spelled out in the ISO standard, the International Standards Organization ISO 9000 standard, whatever process that you're using, if it works for you and your organization and it's being used on a regular basis, then leverage that process's strengths. I say compensate for its weaknesses, and I would just suggest on that, go back to what I previously talked about in terms of the 4 attributes: the process, people, customer, and data, and look to see if there's any weaknesses in the process you're using. Make sure you've compensated for that to ensure that the methodology you're using is working well. But at the end of the day, use a methodology that works. If you don't have a methodology, if your organization doesn't have a methodology, then I would encourage you to consider the Lean Six Sigma methodology. Now, what's the worst practice? We said, is there a wrong way? The wrong way is when people do things like jump to a solution. They don't understand what the real problem is. Instead, they just have a solution and say, we're going to put this solution in. It may or may not fix the problem. It may not even be related to the problem, but it's their favorite issue or their favorite item, and so they're just trying to implement it everywhere they can. It's not necessarily, it doesn't say that that's a bad thing to do. It's just that it doesn't address the problem. So don't jump to a solution. Make sure you've understood what the problem is. Another worst practice would be not listening to customers and not listening to subject matter experts. Make sure you've looked both to the people who are the recipients of the process or product and find out from them what's going on, what's working and what's not, and talk to the people who are in the process doing the work and find out from them what's working and what's not. Don't come in with your own assumptions and just drive those in and push them through. Instead, find out what's really happening. Sometimes it'll surprise you as to how good or how bad things really are. Another problem that we run into sometimes is procrastination. As people are saying, well, I don't know exactly what the problem is, so I don't do anything. I don't know exactly what we should do next, so I do nothing at all. Well, of course, that's one of the values of using the methodology. The methodology tells you what to do next, and by doing that, you will come to a clearer understanding of the problem, and you'll be able to identify a solution for that problem. But procrastinating, because we don't know the answer before we even start, does not help anything. And then the last one I want to mention as a worst activity, worst practice is, and I've unfortunately have seen this many times, is unfocused activity. There's a problem. Let's do something about it. And so we call together a team and we say, this is what we want to work on. Let's fix it. And 5 people go running out doing 5 different things that are not coordinated, not integrated. They're all trying something different, and they actually get in each other's way rather than having a coordinated, focused process, a methodology that keeps us all in step to get the work done. We have people working at cross purposes, and we miss some important items when that happens. Well, let me actually just talk a little bit about an improvement strategy, since we are going to look for the right way to do things. By an improvement strategy, one that I have found that works very well when I'm in a problem-solving mode, is I first look to find what are what we call the special cause problems, the things that are very unique, that are different, something that very unusual has happened. When that occurs, I find that, and I search that out. I understand what was the underlying cause, what was the root cause for that, and then I take actions to either eliminate that root cause altogether or put in some kind of a filter or buffer to screen it out, to prevent it from occurring again. But sometimes it isn't an unusual thing. It isn't that waiting for the volcano to erupt. Instead, we just every day have high winds coming in and they're causing problems for us. Well, in that case, I've got what we call a common cause problem. It's a problem that happens routinely because it's embedded in the nature of the environment we work in. It's part of our process or part of our customer base. And when that happens, we need to understand the overall system, and in that case, determine how can we change the system in order to either operate in a different sphere, in a different area, to where we don't have that problem happening all the time, or put in the system controls to control that on a daily, regular basis. It's not an infrequent, unusual item. It's an everyday item. This just happens to be a strategy that I've used when I've approached problems to address the right way and wrong way. Well, I'll look at what kind of a problem I'm dealing with to make sure that I'm going to be addressing the right problem along the way. Okay, well, our third question is, why do we even need a program? Why don't we just fix things? What good is a program for us? What's the benefit we get from that? Well, one thing is that when solving problems, there's often a number of stakeholders and they want to know what's happening. If I have a program, I can explain to them, okay, we're on step 3, we're on step 4, we're on step 5. They can see that we're making progress. They understand now the language of what we're doing, the methodology, and it makes it easier to communicate with them to help them understand that we are moving forward. Even though we don't have an answer yet, we're moving on a process that's going to get us a good answer. Another is that solving problems, often there's a team involved, and the team, if we use a program or a process, the team knows what to do next. They know roles and responsibilities. This structure helps to keep them aligned with each other, sets expectations, and ensures that they function well. Also, it will assist them in team decision making. What's the decision we need to make now in the process? Okay, as we move to the next phase of the process, now what are the decisions we need to make? It just helps to smooth that whole team dynamic as people understand what they should be doing, when they should be doing it. And if you're not working in a team, let's say you're doing a problem solving just by yourself. You've been tasked with doing solving this problem. It's all yours. And you can still find this process is very helpful for you to avoid what's referred to as multitasking. You probably have all heard that term, and we all know what it means. But a reality of multitasking when you're working on a problem-solving project is that you're working a little bit on everything, but you're getting nothing completed. The process organizes our work, helps us to step through, step by step, get the work done, so I don't just jump from one item to another, one call to another, one idea to another, where I'm just constantly bouncing around and not coming up with a clear overall picture of what the issue is, what the problem is, and what we need to do to then finally solve that problem. In fact, I'd like to go now into a little bit more, since we're talking a program, talk a little bit more about the Lean Six Sigma program and just some of the elements it brings in. And a piece of it in particular right now I want to focus on is the project management element of it, because it helps us to stay organized. As we said, it's a Lean Six Sigma is a problem-solving methodology. And it's organized into phases. There are clear endpoints or toll gates at the end of each phase where we're answering a question. Those phases are referred to as define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And at the end of the first phase, we have defined the problem from the customer standpoint. At the end of the second phase, we have now analyzed that problem to identify the root cause. At the end of the third phase, the end of the second phase, which was measure, we've collected the data to make sure we can understand the problem. At the end of the third phase, we've analyzed it to identify the root cause. At the end of the fourth phase, improve, we have developed a solution that we've demonstrated will work. And now the last one, control, the end of the fifth stage, we've got that in place, and we can show that it is controlling the process and it's working on a consistent basis. Those gates or those phase points help people to know what we're doing next and what we're trying to achieve at that point in the process. Also, one of the great things about Lean Six Sigma, it does have a number of templates and checklists and tools that can be used to help the team track their work, conduct their work, make sure they're making adequate progress. And the last point here about the project side of Lean Six Sigma is that it gives us some focus by scheduling the performance, the resources, the budget, scheduling all those, and when they're going to happen, how are they going to happen, allows us to prioritize our work and make sure that we're making good progress along the way. Well, this now actually brings us on to our next question, which is, why should I learn Lean Six Sigma? Now, as I mentioned, Lean Six Sigma is that process, the DMAIC, the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And the other symbol I have up there is the Greek symbol sigma, which that sigma is actually used in the statistical world for a standard deviation, and the Six Sigma folks decided to just glom onto it and use it as their terminology. We don't have to work with statistics, but it's there for us. So let's take a look now at this little bit. Lean Six Sigma is a blend of two of the best practices for solving problems, the Lean approach and the Six Sigma approach. Now, Lean in particular focused on understanding your process and driving waste out of your process, getting rid of problems that create waste in the process. Six Sigma focused on understanding your product or process and eliminating uncertainty and variability. And by combining those two, we get rid of uncertainty and waste, giving us an excellent overall process and product from that. Using the combination of the two, it gives us the structured approach with best practices that we can use, and we can pick and choose which practice best fits the particular problem or issue we're working with. When I teach Lean Six Sigma, I actually teach, in each of these phases, I teach a whole toolkit, a set of tools that you can use for doing defining or measuring or analyzing. And yet on any given project, I'm only going to use one or two of those tools in each phase. But I'll give you 8 or 10 so that you have many to choose from. Now, one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later is knowing which one to choose will be the responsibility of the team leader. That's one of those belts that we'll get to. But the point is, we've got a methodology to help us. We've got tools that we can use along the way. Lean Six Sigma does also work with many different kinds of projects. I've used it in a lot of different ways. I've used it when I've got an unusual defective condition. We've had a problem with a customer or a problem in our operation. We've never seen this before. Lean Six Sigma can be used to figure out what caused that to happen. What was this unique set of circumstances where the sun, moon, and stars aligned in this funny way to create this problem? It helps us find that circumstances so we know what to do about that or to prevent that in the future. And also, it works really well when we have a regular ongoing defective condition, something that it's a chronic condition. We see it again and again and again. You know, what I just described there, incidentally, goes back to what I mentioned on an earlier slide, a special cause or a common cause problem. Works well with both of those. It also works great when we have uncertainty in our process. Because of the lean process performance element, it helps us identify where is this uncertainty coming from, and so I can be prepared for that, and I can now focus in on managing that uncertainty and recognizing when the uncertainty is hitting and creating issues for me, helping me to become proactive instead of reactive to the problems that occur in the business. And the last point I want to mention is I've used it for quality problems. I've also used it for cost problems. We have a cost overrun occurring. We have too much money being spent in a particular area. Why are we spending so much money there? I've used Lean Six Sigma to find out. I've used it for timing problems. We have delays occurring in our process, delays occurring in our ability to serve our customer. Why do we have these delays? Again, I've used Lean Six Sigma, and I focus there on looking at time data rather than quality or defect data. As I've mentioned before, data is one of the attributes. Lean Six Sigma relies on data. You can look at quality data or cost data or schedule data or a combination, but depending on which ones you're looking at, that's going to tell you what kind of an answer you'll be dealing with. Just to wrap up this discussion on Lean Six Sigma, in particular, we get the quality element coming from Six Sigma and the cycle time reduction, the getting rid of the waste coming from Lean. And those are the two things that we often see as the outgrowth of a Lean Six Sigma project. Quality is better and cycle time is lower. So faster, better, that's usually a pretty good recipe for a successful project. So it does have those elements of improvement into your process. The customer focus is helping us making sure we've identified the right problem. So we've got process focus, we've got customer focus. As I've mentioned already, it is data driven. We're going to be using data in the measure phase, the analyze phase, the improve phase, and the control phase, all of those to understand what is happening in our process. And with this, we end up with a new process that we can control, that we can put in place, so we can ensure that this change actually sticks and we see the benefit from it. Okay, So now let's talk about the belts. I mentioned that already. I've alluded to this, that in Lean Six Sigma there's these different belts. What does a belt mean? Well, the belt structure with Lean Six Sigma is just a way of identifying roles and responsibilities of the different team members or individuals involved in this problem-solving methodology. The belt structure is related to martial arts kind of belt structure. So if you're used to thinking black belts and green belts and yellow belts and white belts and all of those, that's where that metaphor came from. But what it's really the level belt that you're dealing with is a way of understanding what people should know, how much of the methodology they should be expert in, and how much they should be using. We would rely on them to lead us with. It helps a Lean Six Sigma project team leader needs to be proficient in the methodology, and this belt method, the belt levels help us know how much proficiency we expect them to have, what to do, and how to do it. I remember I said that we've got lots of tools in each of these phases. You're going to be relying on your black belt and to some degree your green belt to pick the best tools along the way. Lean Six Sigma team members need to understand though how to use the different tools and what the terminology means, helping to make sure that you're communicating effectively. And it helps you to, if you're a yellow belt or green belt, you understand what's expected of you based upon the use of these tools because you've at least been exposed to them. So let's talk now about the belts. The first belt that I want to mention is the Master Black Belt. And a Master Black Belt is really the person in an organization who is in charge of the Lean Six Sigma initiative. They're typically responsible for the training, the coaching of the black belts and the green belts. They administer the program. They make sure they know who's doing what. If there is a website, they own the website. If there's tools and templates that are being used that are automated, they're responsible for that. They seldom are involved in any of the problem solving. They're instead running the program, not solving the problems. So now let's get to the problem solvers. Well, the first one I want to mention is the black belt. A black belt is a subject matter expert in the Lean Six Sigma process and tools. They're expected to know all of the processes, all the tools, and when and how to use them. And in many organizations, the black belt role is a full-time role where they are often leading large Lean Six Sigma projects and coaching several small Lean Six Sigma projects. But the black belt is that person who typically is the one that your senior management is going to turn to and say, okay, what should we do? Have we done this right? Help us guide us in understanding what we need to do. They will often be interacting with the senior management at the gate reviews for the Lean Six Sigma projects. Now the next belt that we'll talk about is the green belt. A green belt is a knowledgeable practitioner in Lean Six Sigma, and these are often the people leading the small projects. These are usually not a full-time position. The people who are green belt, they have a real job doing something else, but they've been trained in the Lean Six Sigma so they can apply the Lean Six Sigma tools and techniques to their job, to solving problems on their job. Often a manager will be a green belt, or a supervisor will have a green belt. And when an issue comes up, they'll pull together several of their people in their organization and maybe one or two of the customer supplier organizations, create the team and work on the problem, and they can lead that as part of running their operation. They're not the subject matter expert. When they run into problems, they go back to the black belt and say, I got a problem here. What do I do? Help me figure this one out. And the black belt would then say, well, have you tried this technique? Or I suggest you use this approach. Or wait a minute, you missed something in the measure phase. Let's go back and do a measurement systems analysis. They'll make a suggestion for something that may need to be done to help that green belt be successful. The green belt, though, is typically leading that small project. And now the yellow belt. That's what we're supposed to be talking about today. Well, yellow belt are the subject matter experts who are on the team. They're a subject matter expert in the product or the process. They're not a subject matter expert in Lean Six Sigma, but they've been exposed to Lean Six Sigma. They've been exposed to in particular the team-based skills and tools and techniques, and they're able to participate effectively and efficiently on the team projects. When the green belt or the black belt says, okay, folks, we need to do a fishbone, they know what that means. They understand that because that's one of the team-based techniques that we would expect a yellow belt to know. So those are what the belts are. And yellow belt in particular then is if you want to be working on problem-solving teams, if you are working on problem-solving teams, a yellow belt is an appropriate level of expertise and knowledge for you to be a great contributor on that team. Well, let's talk now a little bit about this subject matter expert role. And in particular, on a problem-solving team, what do we expect the subject matter expert to actually be doing? What do we want them to complete? What do we want them to accomplish? Well, some problem-solving teams often are going to need several subject matter experts, especially if it's a problem that has a cross-functional nature to it. Usually there isn't one person who knows everything. So we may need someone with knowledge of the customer application, possibly a customer themselves on the team. We may need someone from the product design or the process design or the technologies involved who understands how this thing really works and how does this thing really come together. There may be someone who's an expert in the organizational systems or structures. In particular today, in our day of digital age technology, we often need someone from our IT or digital background to explain how all the data is moving around in the systems and what's happening and how do these things work together, how do they talk together. As we get a problem in one area, can rapidly in milliseconds migrate throughout the whole business because of our digital technology. So we often need people with their unique functional expertise, their perspective of what the problem is, and at least what is the impact of the problem. These subject matter experts are involved throughout the problem-solving process. They don't just come to one meeting and dump the problem on the table and say, okay, you go fix it. They're there, they're helping on the team. Now, it doesn't mean that they're full-time. It doesn't mean that that's 100% of their job for the next 6 weeks. But they are helping to clarify the problem. They're helping us to analyze the data, collect the data that we need to collect to make sure we get to the root cause. Often, this is something that because we have brought them on the team because of their subject matter expertise, the subject matter area is the area that they work in anyway. So this is part of their job. It's something they already know. It's something they already have. Collecting the data is something they're already doing. Working on this problem or understanding this problem is something they already have on their list of one of the actions they're supposed to be working on this year as part of their overall goals or objectives. And these subject matter experts will also be involved in creating the solution because we want to make sure we don't create a solution that just causes more problems. So they'll evaluate that solution to say, not only does that solution solve this problem, but it doesn't create a new problem or it doesn't cause other problems to occur because of it. Now, what may happen is by solving that problem, other things that were problems in the past are now exposed. That's okay. It just means that now we're getting to yet a different issue. But by solving this bigger problem, what's now being exposed are typically minor problems. And especially if the solution requires activity in multiple functions, you need to have that subject matter expert from all those functions to help you implement things. If you just try to come walking in saying, well, you just need to do this because I said you need to do it, people aren't going to react very nicely to that. They want to know that somebody who's in their group, speaks their language, knows what it is they do and how they do it, is leading the implementation of the improvement or the change. That will go a long way towards making sure that's effective. In fact, let's talk for just a minute about putting that change in the various departments. You found a solution to the problem. You want to get it in place. Let's look at some of the elements of the change and things that have to happen when you're trying to manage that change implementation piece. Well, one thing is we need to understand what the structural element is of that change. What do we mean by that? Was this going to cause reporting relationships to change, accountability to change? If we change this process, are we now going to remove a step or two? Or are we going to add a step or two? What does that do to the work that the people are being expected? How is that changing what's involved with them? And does that change how they're being measured? The rewards, the punishments, their measures, their KPIs. The measurement system, I've worked, I was very frustrating. Working one time with a company, we were having some trouble in the shipping department. We found what our problems were. We figured out the issues. We put in place a new shipping protocol that would ensure that customers got their product much quicker. And 2 months later, the problem was back. And we said, what happened? Well, it turned out because the manager of the shipping department was being measured on how many trucks go out full versus half full. He would hold up shipments sometimes for a week until he could get a full truckload to go to a particular location. And when he said, well, but we gave you this new system, and he said, yeah, but my bonus check is based upon full truckloads. And so we're only sending out full truckloads. I don't care what your system is. We had to get back to the measurement system and how he was being rewarded in order to get that change to fully be implemented and accepted in the organization. Another context for change that, again, we rely on the subject matter expert to help us with is the procedural context. Making sure that those who have to do the work, and the work will be changing for them, and many people don't like change. They're already very good at what they're doing, at least they think they're good at what they're doing, and now you're coming in and telling them they have to do it differently. Now they're going to have to do something they don't know, they don't understand, and there's uncertainty and risk, and they don't like that. Well, on top of that, when you come in and try to make a change where you're eliminating some steps, you might be eliminating work that somebody has been doing for years, and they value that. That's important. That's who they are. They've defined their role in the organization by doing these steps, and you just said, we don't need those anymore. We need to make sure we understand what's the core values, what's the core principles driving each department. And that subject matter expert knows that and will know how to couch that implementation of the change in a way that will be acceptable to that person. That yes, we know what you've been doing, and what you've been doing has been saving our butt for the last 4 or 5 years. And now we're going to finally let you move on to working on what's really important for our customers. You no longer have to protect us from some of our internal problems. Now you can be serving customers. Whatever it might be, they help to put that in a proper perception or perspective of what needs to be done. The other elements of the procedural context is that we need to make sure that whatever changes are, people recognize the legitimacy of that, the fairness of that, how it's being approached, that they're not being punished by this, someone else isn't being overly rewarded. Instead, we're just changing to a new methodology that's going to be better for our customers and ourselves. Obviously, the leaders need to also understand that so that they are able to help manage that process effectively. The third area of context is the emotional context. Sometimes what we have to do is first create dissatisfaction before people will be ready to change. And again, you as a subject matter expert, you can come in and explain things in a way that helps people in that process, in that part of the business, understand why this is an issue. Put it in words that make sense for them and in a metaphor that works for them. Getting them so where they want the change to happen because they know it's going to be good for the company, good for the customers, good for the world. We energize our employees with hope by what we bring for them, and you're the person who makes that hope real because you can explain it to them in words that matter and things that matter and elements that matter in their regular day-to-day work. And finally, it gives opportunities and our employees an opportunities to invest in this new change. You give them an opportunity to hear their voice, to be part of the change, and now they are much more likely to be on board because it's part of who they are now. Well, let's move on to our next question, which dealt with the statistics piece. And sometimes I hear this question: do we need the statistics? Are they required for us to do a Lean Six Sigma project or even to solve problems in general? And now the short answer is no, it doesn't have to be statistics, but we do need data. We need data to understand what the problem is. Statistics are one way of summarizing data, of analyzing data, but they're not the only way. The Lean Six Sigma methodology relies on some statistical tools and analysis on the Six Sigma element of it. But quite frankly, the Lean element of the Lean Six Sigma methodology never relied on statistics. It relied instead on visual techniques to explain the data, of using the value stream map as a way of displaying the data. So we can use you can use statistics to summarize the data, or you can use some other techniques. I'll just mention a few of those. As I said here, visualization is often a much more effective way of dealing with the data. Many people who, especially if they don't know the math, don't understand the statistics, telling them that, well, that's a Four Sigma process, doesn't mean a thing to them on that. But if you tell them, by doing that process, we're probably only going to have one problem out of every 10,000 times we do it. Oh, now that means something to them. You show them on a picture, you show a big target of this is all the possible things that could happen, and we're just talking about this one little tiny dot in the lower right-hand corner. Okay, now I understand what you're talking about. So that visualization can often be very helpful for people, especially if they don't have the math background to understand the statistics. But statistics are also very helpful, and so I don't want to downplay the importance of them. They will be great for helping you determine what's really going on in the process, and in particular establishing true relevance. The statistics are a way of defining this is what our normal behavior looks like. This is how long it usually takes to do this process. It usually takes us about 7 hours, plus or minus an hour or two, but you need to anticipate it's going to take 7 hours to do this. And statistics helps us to understand what that normal performance is. Then I can look at the data points and determine the data that I'm looking at. Is that just part of normal process performance, or was that one of those unusual, unique, way out in left field items that we have to address? So statistics are very helpful, very beneficial for us, but we don't have to always use statistics. Six Sigma, the term Six Sigma itself, is a statistical measure, but once again, it's a measure that's saying we're going to be making stuff really good. If you look at this picture that I have here on this slide, in the Six Sigma process, that little bell-shaped curve up there says that that's what the normal performance, the normal variation is of that process. And the two lines on either side are what are my specification limits or my customer expectations. And you can see a Six Sigma process, I'm well within my expectations with no problem at all. I'm always keeping my customer happy. 5 Sigma, I'm always keeping my customer happy. 4 Sigma, I'm probably going to always keep them happy. 3 Sigma, okay, I'm going to bump up against those lines from time to time. 2 Sigma, well, I'm definitely sometimes outside the lines, and that's just going to be part of normal behavior and normal circumstances, and the customer has to be used to it. And if I actually showed you a 1 Sigma, you would see that I'm only inside the lines a little over half the time. And so that's why Six Sigma is a way of expressing how well we're meeting customer expectations, giving us a way of statistically describing that phenomena. But let's talk a little bit more about data, since I mentioned the data is what's really important here, not so much statistics. Data is facts about the real world. If we want to solve the real problem, we need to have data about the real problem. Data will describe attributes of our problem, of our process. Data is what helps us understand what's going on. Now, statistics is a numerical analysis of those real-world facts. Now, keep in mind, some of those facts may not even be numerical in context. If one of my facts is that some of these problems happen in the USA, some of the problems happen in China, some of the problems happen in Australia, and some of the problems are happening over in France. I can't put that into numerical numbers. That's not a numerical. That's an attribute type of data. So I can't use statistics with all types of data. But when I have numerical data, then I can use the statistics and it can help me analyze to summarize and interpret the numerical facts that we have about the problem. So it's a great way for understanding that. But what we really are focused on is our data. Statistics just help us understand the data. Data sets can be described numerically with statistics, so I can summarize an entire data set, thousands of data points. I can summarize that with statistical terms like what's the mean or average, and what's the range, the minimum and maximum point, and what's the standard deviation, the normal spread of that data. So I can be using some of these terms, these statistical terms, to describe that data to give us a better understanding. But we can also describe that data visually. I can show you a bar graph, a pie chart. I can show you the graphs I showed you on the previous slide to explain what's happening in the process. So don't overlook the power of visualization of data. In today's world, a lot of our visualization tools are much more powerful than they were even just a few years ago. And when you're working with your data now, I would strongly encourage you to look at data visualization tools as ways to not only identify problems, but to then communicate that within your team, to your stakeholders, and even broadly through the organization. Okay, so let's get to our last question that we were going to mention, and that's, should I bother getting certified? And if I'm going to do it, how do I go about doing this? Well, I'm going to focus in on the yellow belt certification right now because that's what this webinar was supposed to be talking about. But some of these principles would apply to any type of certification with respect to Lean Six Sigma. Now, let's just be clear. You don't need a certificate to solve a problem. If you get a problem out there, you can apply these tools and techniques and solve problems just fine. I was solving problems for many years before I earned my Black Belt certification. I've been like I said, I've been involved in problem-solving teams and problem-solving processes for many years prior to that, and we solved a lot of problems without having that little certificate that hangs on the wall. But one of the things that the certification does do is it demonstrates that you've actually got some expertise, that you have done the studying, you've done the work, that you know what you're talking about. That when somebody says, well, why should we do it that way? You say, well, I am a Lean Six Sigma green belt or yellow belt or black belt. And I do know the proven methodology, a way that's going to help us get things resolved, get to the root cause, and solve the problem. So it gives you added credibility because it demonstrates that you have expertise in problem solving. It can also enhance your career. Some positions you'll see advertised. You go out and look on LinkedIn or whatever job posting site you're looking at. You'll see positions advertising that a black belt or a green belt is a must-have, or at least a nice-to-have. Yellow belts. Typically, yellow belts are not advertised so much from a career standpoint. They'll be usually better for an internal career because they don't yet put you into a leadership role. But green belt and black belt, you're into leadership roles, and so many times those will show up as requirements for a position, or at least desirements for the position. Certification can be obtained now through a variety of different ways. You can do it through external certifying bodies or through an internal body. An internal being, a lot of companies have their own certification process. When I was first exposed to Lean Six Sigma many years ago, I was in the General Electric company. I was working in GE then. And GE had its own certification process for certifying people as Lean Six Sigma. But there are a number of external agencies now that if your company doesn't have your own processes, you can use. The two most commonly used ones in the world are ASQ, the American Society for Quality, and ISAC, the International Association for Six Sigma Certification. Those are the most widely recognized certifying bodies around the world at this point in time. There are other regional ones. There are some that are unique to a particular country, but these two have a wide following virtually everywhere. There are some differences between them. I'll explain that difference a little bit more on the next slide. Most the certification programs are going to require that you have some type of formal training, that you've been trained, or you can demonstrate that you've had training knowledge in the area of the Lean Six Sigma. You will have to go through some type of testing in order to demonstrate that knowledge. And often there is some level of demonstrated project proficiency. You've been on projects, you've led projects, you've been involved in projects. So let's jump over to take a look at, in particular, the ISAC certification. This is the one that GoSkills has aligned with, and the primary reason why is that ISAC encourages the project performance, the project participation. It doesn't require it. ASQ requires project participation, and therefore it means that to get an ASQ certification, you've got to now be submitting project reports, and there's just a lot more documentation on that. With ISAC, you have to go through what training you need to get prepared, and then you have to take an exam, a rigorous exam. But with that rigorous exam, you can now use that. That is your. It demonstrates knowledge. So it doesn't really demonstrate proficiency in using it, but it demonstrates knowledge and understanding. Many of the exam questions are ones where you have to understand how to use the tools and the principles to be able to pass it. So the ISAC, as we said, is one of these certifying bodies. We've got the website there, and this is also, you can find this in some of the GoSkills material. It is an independent third-party certification body. We don't get paid by Isaac. We are listed as an Isaac certified trainer because we've had our materials reviewed by them, and they've agreed that yes, we do teach to the body of knowledge that Isaac recognizes. So Isaac does the certification training. They don't do the or certification testing. They don't do the training. GoSkills does our training. They don't do consulting. If you want a consultant, you need to talk to a Lean Six Sigma consultant. They're not going to coach you on your teams. What they're going to do is make sure that you have demonstrated that you know the tools and techniques and you know them well. The exams are designed to measure the person's knowledge of the topic. And there is a body of knowledge associated with each of these levels, yellow belt, green belt, and black belt. The yellow belt level is very light on the statistics, but it's very heavy on knowing the visual tools that are used in the problem-solving methodology. So if you go for the yellow belt, you'll be looking at doing at working that element of the problem solving, understanding the basic methodology and knowing how to use the team and visual tools for analyzing, collecting and analyzing your data and demonstrating improvement. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon now. And Shannon, do we have any questions I can answer?
Hey, yeah, thanks for the great insights, Ray. We definitely do have a few questions from our live chat here. So I guess we can kind of pick up where you left off with the yellow belt certifications. One question here is, how difficult is the yellow belt exam?
Well, if you didn't study, it's very difficult. Which probably not a surprise. That would probably also be true for many exams. If you go to the Isaac website, you can download their body of knowledge, which identifies every topic that will be tested on the exam. Now, most of the exam questions from a yellow belt, let me put in a brief caveat. I never took the yellow belt exam because when I was taking the exam, I was already past the yellow belt stage. But from what I understand, what I've read, what I've seen, and what I've talked with others, the yellow belt questions are going to be testing your knowledge of, do you know what these tools are? Do you know when to use the tools? So you do need to understand the nomenclature. You need to know what the different names of the tools are. You need to know what is a fishbone diagram. You need to know what does it mean when we say a control chart. What does that mean? But you don't need to know how to build a control chart and how to work with it. You need to know what the tools are, when you would use them, and for in particular the visual tools, the team-based visual tools, you do need to know how to use them. There will be some questions that are in days past I would have called a thought problem. They'll lay out a scenario and they said, given this scenario, blah 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 blah. What tool would you, or how would you use this tool, or which of these tools best represents the problem as we've just described it? And so you would be looking at that tool set and saying, okay, that's what that means. Or in the context of the visualization, look at this, given this bar graph, what are the most important elements? Which items are the significant, which ones are insignificant, based upon analyzing this graphical data, which would be part of your yellow belt body of knowledge.
Cool. Okay. So also kind of on that note, how can I get certified as a yellow belt? You kind of touched on that as well, but can you just reiterate the channels for certification?
Sure. There's I'll mention the Isaac one first because that's the one in particular that we in GoSkills are aligned with. You would go to the Isaac website and you would find a training provider. Actually, you don't need to do that. You already found one. But after you complete the yellow belt training with GoSkills, or wherever else you get your training, you go to the Isaac website. There's an application there that you fill out, and in that application, that's fairly straightforward information about you, and you have to pay your fee. But then at that point, at the end of that, once your application is accepted, you can either take the test at a testing center where there's boy, I forget how many thousand testing centers around the world, and Isaac has the list of the of how you can find a testing center where you could go to, or you can take it as a proctored online exam. And if you're going to do a proctored online exam, there's some criteria that your computer must meet because it has to have a camera and a microphone and things that, again, all that is spelled out on the Isaac site. So you can read through that and determine which methodology you'd prefer to take. My recommendation would then be, after you've completed your training, do a day or two or a weekend of studying, everything fresh in your mind, and then take the test at that point. Now that's for Isaac. For ASQ, you have similar in the context of needing to put in the application, but with ASQ, as part of your application, you also have to put in your project description, and you have to have spent a certain number of months on a project, and that number has varied from time to time. Right now I think it's 6 months that you have to have been already doing work on a problem-solving project for 6 months in a non-yellow belt category before you can test for the yellow belt exam. So that's you have to build up that project experience to go along with it.
Cool. So kind of two different options. So do you have to take the yellow belt exam before the green, or can you skip to the green belt program?
You could skip right to the black belt. You can once you've taken a green belt, you don't want to bother with the yellow belt because the green belt is everything in the yellow belt plus more. Once you've taken the black
Right.
belt, you wouldn't bother with the green belt. But you don't have to start with yellow. In fact, some organizations, Isaac does not offer this, but some organizations even have a white belt. Some companies, they have a white belt, which there is basically you don't have to know how to do anything. You just have to be exposed to stuff. So you go to a 4-hour seminar that you can sleep through the whole thing, and in that case, you get your white belt by still having a pulse at the end of the training seminar. But for if you can go right to green belt, you could even go straight to black belt. Keep in mind the amount of information you need to know, the tools you need to know are significantly increased in the green belt and the black belt arena. You definitely need to be able to do the statistical analysis if you're going to be doing green belt and black belt.
All right. So next question, does Lean Six Sigma work in any kind of organization or only with manufacturing companies?
Well, its history is manufacturing. Lean was started in Toyota in their manufacturing environment. Six Sigma was started at Motorola in their manufacturing environment. So it definitely works in manufacturing and has started there. But over the years, there's been a major initiative to move Lean and Six Sigma out of manufacturing and into other organizations. So I'm part of a LinkedIn group that does Lean Six Sigma for healthcare providers. I've done Lean Six Sigma consulting and training at a university on university processes. If you have a process that you follow, if you deliver a product or service to a customer, you can apply Lean Six Sigma. You still will have data that you can collect. You still have a customer you're working with. You still have issues that you want to resolve, either to remove defects, lower cost, or make it faster. So all of those principles still apply. It's just you'll be using that on a different kind of process. So a long answer to a very clear question, or the short answer to that question would have been anything. Instead
Cool.
I gave you the longer answer.
All right, nice one. So kind of on that tip, a question about whether you have any experience with Lean Six Sigma in order fulfillment operations.
Absolutely. That is, in fact, I've been working, or last year was working with an organization that's a significant piece of what they were doing. Again, it's a perfect example. Order fulfillment is a process. The order comes in, we have to gather everything up, package it, put it together, send it out, build a customer. There's what's interesting about that process in today's world is there's typically both a physical process happening and there's also a digital process happening in the context of communicating with the customer, invoicing the customer, receiving payments, because most of the time that payment is now coming through online also. And those two processes need to stay synced. And if we have something that becomes, if they get out of sync, that's a huge defect, a big problem. And in particular, that's what I was looking at with this other company, is that they would sometimes get the processes would get out of sync, and then they would have a mistake, or there would be a big delay as one process was holding up the other. And so we laid out the process, looked to find out how those were working together, identified the places for waste, identified the places where we had problems of incorrect data or incomplete data, missing data, and went to the root cause, recognized what the root cause was, and put in the changes to improve that, and allowing them to improve their customer satisfaction rates significantly. Faster, more accurate, fewer problems along the way.
Awesome. Okay, so final question. What should you do if your organization has decided not to do Lean Six Sigma?
That's a great question. Remember that I said there's lots of problem solving methodologies out there. Lean Six Sigma is one of them. If your organization has another methodology, then I would say follow it. You might still want to do Yellow Belt because the tools that you use in Yellow Belt, you can use in any of those methodologies. Even if they're not statistical based, they still will probably have teams involved because all of the good ones had teams involved. They'll still want to use data, and Yellow Belt focuses on the visualization of data, the collecting of data and visualization of the data. There's still the Yellow Belt methodology might be, or the process might be a little bit different from the process that you would use. Just use that your process. So for instance, if you use the 8 discipline process, instead of 5 stages, there's 8 stages. But if you look at it closely, you'll see that what they've done is they've just taken several of the Lean Six Sigma 5 stages and broke them into 2 pieces. So you can use that other methodology, and you can use the tools of the Yellow Belt tools. That anything you would learn in Yellow Belt will have direct applicability into any other methodology. And quite frankly, if your business has no methodology, you can still do Lean Six Sigma on your own. You don't have to actually certify anybody. You can just know what you're talking about, know what you're doing, and demonstrate that you've got your act together because you know how to do this.
Awesome. Okay, great. So that's the end of the webinar for today. We will have your slides available for download on this webinar page. Anything you want to say to finish things off, Ray?
I hope all of you have successful projects, that you find those root causes, you fix those problems, and that you create tremendous benefit for your business.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for participating in the webinar, everybody, and have a great day.